Yankees Files podcast. We are back. I'm Will Harris, you're Alec Whipple, and the rest of you are fans of the team that leads Major League Baseball in wins, in winning percentage, in WRC plus, in OPS, in position player Fangraphs WAR, and I have a leaderboard updating. Just give me one moment. And not home runs, but it feels like home runs. That team, of course, is the New York Yankees, who just won a series against the Texas Rangers and elite manager Bruce Bochy at home before going on the road to face the Chicago White Sox for the next few games. We have a lot to get into from the week that was, the doubleheaders that were, and a baseball season that is now. Can it both be ramping up with respect to the importance of games and winding down with respect to the number of games left? But anyway, before we get into that, Whipple, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I got to see elite manager Ron Washington beat the Yankees and lose to the Yankees on the same day. So Ron Washington is both better than Aaron Boone and Bruce Bochy, and then worse than Aaron Boone and Bruce Bochy. So I guess the manager elite rankings are a little bit, tough to figure out. I think a lot more tough than people would like to admit, but yeah, I'm doing well. I've enjoyed my final weeks here in New York. I'm enjoying some Yankees baseball, both on the TV and in person. And just really, I think, as you're saying, like, this is kind of the last stretch of baseball where, although like every game is important, I think the head-to-head matchups and the importance of the specific games against Texas and Anaheim and next week Chicago or Detroit, like, it just feels like, it's more about checking the box, getting as many wins as you can. I really like that part of the baseball season, especially when the Yankees win, because that always makes it more fun.
I do like when the Yankees win too.
It does feel like it's both like progressing and like kind of starting to wrap up in terms of like the dog days of summer. And that's exciting. And it's an exciting team in many ways. I was going to say something about how every game either feels like a blowout or like they get blown out, but then today's game kind of screwed that up a little bit.
Today's game should have been a blowout.
It should have been. Even like, I was in the first game of the doubleheader on Wednesday and they won 5-2, but it had like blowout vibes. I feel like it's just that point of the year. So, everything we talk about, it's nice to just talk about games. It's nice to see the Yankees are having a very good season at pennant race, but like, the actual specific games right now are not as important as they will be, when a few weeks, a few months, hopefully as long as possible. So it's an exciting time. I really do like this part of the baseball season.
So normally we don't start the podcast by looking ahead, but when I opened up the Yankees roster resource page to look at the upcoming week, this stuck out to me. And I'm going to be vulnerable here, and I want to see if you are in a similar position. The Yankees play 3 games in Chicago beginning on Monday, which might be the day you're listening to this. Then they have an off day on Thursday, and then they play 3 games in Detroit. Here are the slated starting pitchers in those games for Chicago and Detroit, as reported by the current roster resource page. Monday, Kai Bush. Tuesday, Jonathan Cannon. Wednesday, Davis Martin. Friday, Brent Herter. Saturday, Keider Montero. And Sunday, Tarek Skubal. I'm going to be very honest. I have heard of I have heard of one of the guys the Yankees are slated to face in the next 6 games. And it's Tarek Skubal. I've never heard, maybe I've heard of Jonathan Cannon. It kind of rings a bell, but there have been at least 1 or 2 NFL players I can think of whose last names were Cannon, and maybe I'm getting them mixed up. I don't know these guys, who they're facing, and hopefully that means the Yankees will just mash for a week. But like, are you aware of these baseball players? Because I just am not.
Some like Gen Z type BS that the Yankees are facing their second guy named Davis in 2 weeks.
Exactly, like, Davis Daniel and Davis Martin. Also, 2 guys named Davis who their last name is a first name.
Yeah.
Like Daniel Davis and Martin Davis would be more real people than Davis Daniel and Davis Martin.
I feel like, right, it kind of exposes, like, I definitely am in the same position, and I think the Angels are kind of another team where, like, there's a lot of guys who are, like, we're saying, like, creative player type,
Yeah,
Davis Daniels, like, your pitcher who got drafted and is stuck on, like, a bad franchise trying to get traded, and MLB The Show. So, yeah, no, it's bleak out there, and I think at least Texas has some name brand characters that we all know. Chicago
exactly.
and Detroit,
Andrew Heaney among them.
yeah. I mean, aside from like a few guys, it's really rough that
Okay, so
you know,
I'm
Andrew
doing
Heaney
some.
pitching today though. Like I feel like that brought me back a few years. It was just good for the archives.
I was ready for the Yankees not to do anything against Andrew Heaney and Twitter to like collapse on itself. Also, in fairness to us, Kai Bush, who the Yankees allegedly are slated to face on Monday, 4 major league innings pitched. Brant Herter, 8 major league innings pitched. Kiter Montero, 49 and 2/3 in the major leagues. Davis Martin actually pitched 63 innings last year, but only 12 this year, and all of them for the White Sox, so nobody's paying attention. Jonathan Cannon, 96, Kiter Montero, 49 2/3. I think I already said. So these are guys I think we can be excused for not being intimately familiar with.
Yeah. The other thing I didn't realize, just exposing vulnerability, I didn't realize they're playing in Williamsport this week. I feel like that's been like under advertised. Did you know that? Or
No, I
okay.
certainly, I mean, obviously I knew that at some point that game was happening, but
Yeah.
it didn't occur to me that it was this week. And maybe I don't know what drives that, because the like the game is against the Tigers. If the game were against the White Sox, you'd be like, oh, well, the White Sox have been so bad, like they're not getting hyped up by the media establishment. The Tigers, I mean, they're not very good. They're 7 games under 500, but they, for much of the season, were playing above
Right.
expectations, I would say. And the fact that the game is, as you said, this week does make it kind of crazy. So that will be the Sunday night baseball game. Yeah, definitely weird.
Yeah,
Definitely weird.
out there right now. That's the dog days of August. It's the beauty and of just kind of not knowing. Even for baseball nerds like us, there's like a kind of a beauty in just not really knowing like what's going on sometimes.
Yeah,
The
it's
more I
definitely
know,
weird, but I agree.
yeah,
Under advertised.
the more I like learn about baseball and watch the more I do appreciate like where you just kind of just don't know, and then it takes you back to like 15 years ago where you just like didn't know anything, and like you looked at like the ESPN highlights to figure out what's going on. Like I do kind of, that brings me back a little bit.
Isn't it funny? That's actually a great point. And I was thinking about this because there's this awesome account on YouTube. And if I remembered it by name, I would shout it out. But this account has been posting the Sports Center highlights from like every day of the 2008 baseball season. So if you just Google like August 19th, 2008 Sports Center highlights, it will come up, and that's how you can find this person. But it just reminded me of that era of being a baseball fan. Like it may come as a surprise to you that I was not, when I was in like second grade, on Fangraphs every day, as I am today. But like I was certainly, when I was in second grade and whatever that was, 2004 and 5, I was certainly watching Sports Center every day. And that's where a lot of my opinions about, well, first of all, it's where a lot of my information about what was going on in the baseball season came from, but it was also where a source through which I would develop a lot of my opinions about baseball players. So like, for example, I remember being in 3rd grade, which was oh gosh, uh 2000, end of 2005 and beginning of 2006 baseball seasons. And in those seasons, Hank Blaylock hit for an 88 WRC plus. But I felt like I was always seeing highlights of him and Mark Teixeira going yard. So like in 2006, I would have told you Hank Blaylock is probably like a really good Major League Baseball player. And he wasn't. Like he just simply was not. And it's just, it's you're absolutely right. It's funny to think about like how the manner in which we consume information about baseball has changed. And I mean, I think that's been kind of consistent across sports, but yeah, it's just a funny thing. Shout out Hank Blaylock, who has 9.2 career Fangraphs WAR, but was really good in 2003 and 2004. I want to point that out. I don't want to sell him short.
I always go back to the 2009 trade deadline. Like I think I mentioned it last time, but just the fact that like I'm just like learning through refreshing a Safari, or I don't know, Safari or whatever it was. It probably wasn't Safari because it wasn't iPhones back then, but like on my dad's phone, like I'd be like, Dad, can I look at your phone to see MLB trade rumors? I'd look at see, and it was just like, okay, Yankees got Jerry Harrison Jr. I was like, that's cool. Like I don't really know who he is, but like I'm sure he will help. I'm really excited by that. And then, like that was it. It wasn't like constantly refreshing and to be fair, like, within a few short years, I was like constantly refreshing. So it was more like I was just too young, but like, it's just a simple innocence, or like reading the paper the next day. Like we got the paper and I'd read, the box score. It's like, it sounds so weird now, but it was like in the moment, you're kind of just like watching what was on TV and then you'd like look what was on the paper. Like it was just a different way. And I think it's cool.
Stats in the paper. That was a golden age.
The Hartford Courant. I'd read the Hartford Courant sports page. My dad got the New York Post for a long, long time too.
Yeah,
like,
I remember that.
You remember? Yeah, we'd put up like the Post back.
Yeah.
So yeah, Doug Whipple was like cornering the New York Post sales market in Avon, Connecticut. But yeah, I think it's great. I think that this is like the peak. August is like peak baseball for just random stuff.
Chilling
like,
out.
Makes you appreciate the game.
I just Googled a 2009 trade deadline recap, and this is just peak remember some guys, so I'm gonna throw some of that in. The first trade that comes up, Baltimore Orioles trade Ryan Friel to Chicago Cubs for Joey Gathright. That's incredible. Pittsburgh Pirates trade Nate McLouth to Atlanta Braves for Gorkys Hernandez, Charlie Morton, and minor leaguer Jeff Locke. There's some other great ones in here, like Pirates trade Niger Morgan and Sean Burnett to Nationals for Lastings Millage and Joel Hanrahan. Here's a good one. This will be the last one. Do you remember who the Yankees traded for Eric Hinsky?
Oh my God.
I haven't read these names in
just tell me.
years. So the great thing about this trade from the Pirates to the Yankees for Eric Hinsky is everyone who was traded had Eric in his name. So Eric Hinsky goes to the Yankees in exchange for Eric Fryer and Casey Erickson.
That's
which
great.
That has to be some kind of record that everyone in the trade is named Eric in some way or another.
Wait, I have one more. I know we're so off topic, but one more peak, like early, just like not knowing, just being blissfully ignorant about baseball. So I remember, I think it was like 2007, 2008. I was like away, definitely like not following baseball beyond just like watching and, hearing like what my dad would say. We were away on a trip, and I remember my dad's reading the paper. I like come down at like a hotel, and he's like, oh my God, like Andy Pettitte like came 1 out away from a no-hitter last night. I was like, wait, what? Like that was really cool to me. And I was like, I just remember I was like, wow, like, I mean, I didn't realize like, I knew a no-hitter was cool. I was like, wow, this is like really very cool. Like I can't believe like I haven't heard about this, or it wasn't showing anywhere. And then like later that day, he was like, oh, actually I misread it. It was not Pettitte, it was Petite, and it was Yusumero Petite. And I'm like, incredible. Did you not read that? I think it just said like Petite came 1 out away or something, or like very, very close to a no-hitter. So yeah, I was like, my childlike brain at like, age like 9 was like, wow, that information totally valid. I'm not going to verify it at all. And that was just it's fake news. But your dad was a big Gustavo Chacín guy, right? He was, yeah. Chacín and Petite.
Okay, we've gone much too far. So it was some week for the Yankees. I would say there aren't many weeks in the season of a baseball team in which they will play 2 doubleheaders, which of course the Yankees did this week thanks to multiple rainouts. The series with the Angels was really disappointing you went to 2 of those games. I'd love to hear your review of, being at the stadium for those, because it was kind of a bipolar experience, I imagine. So I'd love to hear you talk about that. And then, you obviously were working a lot this summer, but you've also, to an extent, gotten to spend a summer in the city with the Yankees. And as you pack up to move back down to Virginia, I think any reflections that has prompted would be
Yeah.
welcome as well.
I mean, it was weird to be there. It was weird to be there, like, so, when it was so empty for sure. And I think the start that they got off, I kind of just like assumed that it would be like, like a blowout, like 2 blowouts,
Yeah,
5 runs in the first 4 innings. And then it was just hard to come by much luck after that. When you don't hit a home run after the second inning or the third inning of the first game, I think that is a little bit tough. Um, yeah, I mean, it seems like the Yankees kind of just played down to the weather and the competition. And like, I'm not going to provide the most like hard, hitting analysis. It's just like one game was good and clean, and Luis Heel got out of trouble and Clay Holmes pitched well. And then the second game, Will Warren just decided to walk a bunch of people and then threw a bad pitch to Zach Neto. And that's like
yeah,
kind of the ball game. And it was a cool experience to be there for both ends of the doubleheader. Like, I'd never been singing New York, New York in my seats, and then just like, okay, I'm just gonna like not leave and stay here, and they're gonna start 30 minutes later. That was like a very like unique experience.
sure.
It just wasn't, I don't know, like even the win, it's like not that much fun to watch them play the Angels. I feel like that's
Yeah,
what like the week kind of felt like the wins were like, I mean, except for today, which is a little more exciting. I think the blowout wins were, as anticipated, and the losses were tough to watch when the pitching staff breaks down in multiple ways. But for the game I went to, I mean, Will Warren just is starting his major league career, and I think it's tough to make that many judgments. To say he pitched poorly is fine because he did pitch poorly, but to say that he, is never going to stick in the major leagues, I think is kind of silly when we saw him actually do pretty well against Philly in his first game, which I think was, a very impressive, like not the best line, but still more impressive than I think pitching down to a tough Angel or a not so tough Angels lineup.
yeah. And
So
I mean,
that
pitching
was
in
tough.
those conditions too, I
Yeah.
would imagine was
Oh,
particularly difficult.
it was miserable the whole time. I mean, it was just like misting, and Luis Heel didn't know where the ball was going. Like that's what it kind of, like I think it's really hard to sweep a doubleheader. So it kind
Yeah,
of felt like the Yankees just kind of mentally threw in the towel. But at the end of the day, like, you want to get at least one win from a doubleheader. So I think the last game in the series was tougher to watch because that one was a lot more winnable. But the second
yeah,
game was kind of like, I feel like they had the one win, and you just kind of are trying to save innings. And to be fair, the bullpen, I mean, did a really good job that day. I don't think they allowed just the 2 runs in the first game, I want to
hmm,
say. So that was really impressive. And I guess overall, summer watching baseball in the city, like I was awesome. It was the first time I just gotten to, cruise in and out of Yankee Stadium. I feel like the most entertaining game I saw was actually the game they lost against the Dodgers, which was, I
hmm,
mean, that game was just so much fun to go to. We talked at length about that a few weeks ago, but just, be able to cruise over to see them against the Rays and the Angels and the Braves, like just doing it on a whim and seeing Aaron Judge and Juan Soto just play every other week, for one or two games, like we talked about. I mean, it was an experience like I haven't had that. I've had to go to Fenway Park and fight out, battle my inner demons. And that's
yeah.
not as fun as just showing up to the Bronx, getting a drink at Stands and having a good time. And I mean, I know you're inbound into New York City soon enough, so I feel like I'm passing off the baton. But yeah, and you've had that experience before. But for someone who hadn't done that, for a lifelong fan, kind of getting to live out the dream of just packing up work at 5 o'clock and heading up on the 4 train, I thought it was really cool.
That's awesome. Um, any reflections on Will Warren beyond what you said? Just because I was listening, I'm not sure what prompted me to do this, but I was listening earlier today to our spring training podcast, in which we nailed a lot of things about this season, whether it was our Clark Schmidt optimism, or that Juan Soto would have the best season of his career, or that Aaron Judge would lead the team in batting average, even with Juan Soto having the
Right.
best season of his career, whatever it was. One thing that we discussed on that podcast, because of my attending a Yankee spring training game against the Marlins was Will Warren. And I had seen Will Warren pitch in that game, and I was impressed with his ability to miss bats, particularly against a team that still had Luis Ariz on it, was making a lot of contact. And I think that's kind of held true at the major league level. You know, he's striking out over a quarter of the guys he faces, 11.17 per nine. His xFIP is under 5, even though his FIP is in the 5s, and his Sierra is 4.32, which is, you know, really not terrible. I'm interested in, did you have any positive takeaways from what you saw? Obviously, you said he walked a bunch of guys and made a bad pitch to Zach Neto, which really is what it boils down to. But there's some under the hood stuff for Will Warren that really makes me feel like things should not be as bad as they are. And obviously the walks will haunt him for as long as he walks, you know, 10+% of guys he faces. But like, yeah. I don't see Will Warren having an 11 ERA and go, that guy's never gonna make it. So if you had to say something positive about the worst of his 2 major league starts, you know, what would that be?
I mean, it was funny to see his ERA at one point was identical to his strikeouts per 9, which I thought was funny.
Ooh.
So,
I mean, yeah, that actually is where it ended up. Yeah.
Did it end up
11.17 ERA, 11.17 strikeouts per 9.
So I feel like that is, if that kept up, that would be one of the biggest outliers in Major League history.
It'd be hilarious.
No, I mean, he was really close to working out of the jam. Like, he struck out 2 guys with bases loaded, no one out, and was 1 pitch away from limiting it to I think it was 2 runs at that point, or 1 run or 2 runs. And I felt like that was impressive to get to that point. That's why it was like so disappointing when he couldn't get out of it, because I thought he started making pitches like very quickly, and you know, he had 2 great at bats and then just kind of lost it again. And I felt like it looked like, you know, it's not that he didn't have the stuff to put guys away. It was like he was trying to make the perfect pitch and they just weren't biting on it. And then, you know, when he was in the zone, he got screwed on a bad sinker. And I mean, that was bad. Like, we're not going to defend it and say that was good, but it was really impressive to me that, you know, for like a young kid trying to just get out of a tough jam in his second major league start, like, he was, you know, 90% of the way there. And I was kind of bummed just because I thought he had done such a good job almost navigating out of it. And he went on to pitch. I mean, he gave up 2 more runs, but like, he had impressive innings after that. So it was there in like fits and starts, and definitely the stuff is there. I think just a question of, you know, making better pitches and really just the poise of being able to work out of those jams and be able to attack the zone more. I mean, you know, tough situation too, to be called up on last minute notice. Like, he hasn't gotten really any kind of consistency. I see it. Like, I definitely see where it could go. I'm not, that's why I was like, I feel like if it was like bad, like, I don't know, like an Andrew Heaney bad, to bring back an example, like you'd know, or just like be like, it's not worth worrying about. But yeah, it's definitely there. And he had some moments where you could see that. But you know, 8 runs is 8 runs.
Yep. At the end of the day, those are the results. I think it's time for us to take stock of where the Yankees stand, because they had a pretty terrible stretch. They lost a series to the Angels this week, which you shouldn't do. They did everything in their power to blow this last game against the Rangers, but Clay Holmes did not allow it, which we appreciate. Coming into the day, Fangraphs gave the Yankees a 60% chance to win the division and projected them to win 95 games. Baseball Prospectus gave them a 63.3% chance to win the division and projected them to win 95.5 games. Since then, the Yankees have won a game. The Orioles have lost one, putting the Yankees in a tie for first place, putting them in a tie for the best record in baseball. I was out at a bar on Friday night and had a couple of conversations with people in which they said, you know, how do you see the division playing out? And I said, I think it's kind of closer to 2/3 than a coin flip that the Yankees win the division. And my reasoning for that is I think the Yankees are better offensively and slightly better at preventing runs than the Orioles. And look, it's going to be a battle. And I know you're geared up for it because it reminds you of 2012, which is like very much your thing. But how do you see the rest of the season playing out? You know, the Yankees have played, what is it, 119 games? So there are 43 left. That's both a lot of time for something to happen in a division that's tied and not very much time at all for you know, the opportunity to create separation or whatever it might be. So I think we can be confident that there is quite the fight that they will be participating in over the rest of the season. I've said it before on this podcast. I'll say it again. It's not obvious to me that the Yankees aren't the best team in baseball. I don't think that the upper tier of teams, whoever you have in that, whether it's the Yankees, the Orioles, the Phillies, the Guardians, the Dodgers, if you look at run differential, you should probably have the Brewers in that group. It's not obvious to me that that tier of teams have separated themselves by a ton over the field, but it's also not obvious to me that the Yankees aren't the best team in baseball. Where do you stand on how you think these last 43 games will play out?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the story, like we've talked about recently, is just the top teams kind of all either stagnating or collapsing, and that definitely opens some opportunities. I mean, I think it's the Yankees are going to be it. I think they're going to show up to that final series in Yankee Stadium, and there's going to be a 1-game march in between them. Like, I don't think any team is separating. I think I kind of lost that like desire a little while. Okay, not desire. I lost that like aspiration for the, I just kind of have realized that like it is going to be close. And, having said that, probably, that's like it's an unlikely outcome. I feel like the more likely outcome is one team playing better than the other. And, like I just feel like the way they've stayed so close, like we're kind of just in for that kind of division race. And I mean, I hate to say it, like it does kind of suck that the Yankees, need to sweep that last series to have a head-to-head advantage, because it would be nice to have a little more of a boost, or at least like, having to win 2 out of 3, or, only having to win 1 out of 3, because that's
thank you,
division.
Anthony Volpe and Alex Verdugo.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, there's, a few games I think that are the culprits, but yeah, it's tough when you don't play game 163 tiebreakers anymore, which is another thing that really Rob Manfred screwed up.
That's true.
But I hope that it will come down to that last series. I think logically it won't. Like logically there will be some kind of margin, because we never really get that lucky. But my heart says that, my head says that, my heart says these two teams are just going to be going back and forth. And I think you're right to say that it's probably a little more likely the Yankees win the Orioles. I think the Yankees, to me, like have really I feel like the Orioles have just kind of been trending downwards, whereas the Yankees like have peaked or started trending back up a little bit. But then again, the Orioles have had a few good stretches recently. Like it's just tough to peg any of these teams. I just always am going to like bet on the team with Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, like that really is what it comes down to. Like the differences between the Yankees, the Orioles pitching, or the bullpen, or the, any other parts of the teams are just so much less important to me than having those two guys versus having the guys the Orioles have. And I know Gunnar Henderson is good. I know Adley Rutschman is good. I know they have a lot of young talent. Jackson Holiday's playing well, but it's not Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. And that's kind of like what's the story of the season right now. One of the top stories of Major League Baseball is the pairing of Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. Like if you have really separated yourself that much, I have a hard time seeing like the Orioles playing well enough to overcome that, even if the margin is slim. I hope I'm right about that. That's my gut feeling, is that if you have those guys, definitely over the course of a 162 game season, postseason, it's all up for grabs. But over the course of a season, like that's what wins you the division, like having guys at that level. And it's crazy to me how much they have separated themselves. Like it is, the fact that they're the only pair of guys with on base percentage over 400. In fact, they're lapping the field in WAR. I mean, they're just like on another level in all categories of offense.
Yeah. So Aaron Judge currently has a WRC plus of 218, which is ridiculous in a number of respects. I think first, we would point out that in 2022, he had basically the best offensive season, certainly the best non-Bonds offensive season that we had seen since the 1950s. And now he's doing it again. And it's patently ridiculous that he's doing it again. And I would point out that if we look at every qualified offensive season since integration, so 1947 to the present, Aaron Judge has put himself in truly elite company. So we have Barry Bonds in 2001, 2002, and 2004. He's the only player in that time to exceed a 230 WRC plus in a season. Now, we know that there were maybe some special vitamins that helped him reach those heights. Then we have 1957, Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle, who posted 223 and 217 WRC pluses respectively. Aaron Judge is at 218 already. So we'd be talking about the second best non-Bonds offensive season since integration. And that is just completely insane. And it puts into perspective of these things that have started to circulate on Twitter about, Aaron Judge is the best right-handed hitter I've ever seen, or Aaron Judge is the best right-handed hitter since X time, or whatever it might be. If you want to talk about peaks, it's hard to identify a better peak than what Aaron Judge is currently experiencing, from 2022 to today, in the lifetimes of, certainly us or our parents. You can go back and you can look at mid 50s Mantle and Williams, and that's basically where you have to look to see this kind of production purely offensively. Obviously, Trout had, the consecutive 10 WAR seasons or whatever, but what Aaron Judge is doing is something that we certainly have not seen. And I know that we get into this conversation on this podcast a lot, and now that it's lasted for 3 years, it's also hard to tell people, remember to appreciate what you're seeing, because you never know how long it's going to last, because it inexplicably, very explicably, but also inexplicably for the level that it is, keeps lasting. Aaron Judge is, again, what I keep going back to, this is what it was like to watch Mickey Mantle. So if you ever wished you could have watched Mickey Mantle, here it is. He's right in front of you, and appreciate it.
Right. And if you're you're comparing having that player plus Juan Soto, who is being completely overshadowed and having a career best season. I want to talk about things we both somehow got right in the preseason. Me saying that Juan Soto was going to level up, and then you saying that Aaron Judge was basically 2022 peak or better than Juan Soto, and us both being right, you kind of being slightly more
crazy.
Right. Right. It's almost the best possible outcome of that. And I know the Yankees lineup has other problems that are, I think, being fixed. And, you can compare the Orioles lineup and say it's deeper and everything. But I think just having those guys, that's what wins you games. And in a short series and a longer stretch, we've seen it so many times this year. That's the difference maker. And really, we haven't really talked as much about Yankees and Orioles pitching comparison, because I think we focus on Gunnar and Adley and Soto and Judge. But the Orioles pitching is kind of collapsing. And the Yankees pitching, while it hasn't necessarily been standout in all aspects, I think is trending up in a lot of ways. Garrett Cole and Carlos Rodon had great outings this weekend.
You have to love that.
Right. You texted me Cole missing bats,
hard eyes. Yeah.
Right. By some measures, his best start in terms of missing bats since 2022. Carlos Rodon has really shoved for a few outings now. I think Luis Gil's still going strong. You're looking at a Clark Schmidt return relatively soon. Maybe Marcus Stroman has found something. Very positive indicators. Okay, we're trying to be optimistic here.
Yeah.
And I think for the Orioles, if you try to be optimistic, yes, you have Corbin Burns. Nobody's going to doubt Corbin Burns is a great pitcher. But beyond that, like, it's kind of the same problems that we usually see with the Orioles rotation. Without Grayson Rodriguez, it makes it a lot worse. So I would even look, if you want to say the lineups are, Judge and Soto are better, but the Orioles lineup is deeper. Let's go to the pitching. I really think the Yankees have a clear advantage in that. And it's going to keep dividing in that aspect.
I certainly hope so. The Juan Soto being overshadowed by Aaron Judge is actually one of the crazier things about this season. He has a 186 WRC plus. He has already produced more Fangraphs WAR this year than he has in any single season of his career, despite the fact that he's only had 529 plate appearances, which is his fewest in a full season since 2018. The guy is unbelievable, and he found a new level this year. He's obviously doing the typical Juan Soto things like walking more than he strikes out. And we love that. But Juan Soto, typically his expected weighted on base, his ex-WOBA, hovered around 400 in full seasons. It was 409 in 2019. It was 401 in 2022. It was 408 in 2023. It was 475 in the COVID season. And it was 479 or 429 in 2021. This year it's 468. Juan Soto is the only guy within spitting distance of Aaron Judge who has a 474 ex-WOBA this year, and he's vastly underperforming it. He has a 428 WOBA. So that Juan Soto somehow kept his elite plate discipline, his elite on base tool, and managed to post by far the best quality of contact of his career. Like, I don't understand how he did that. I don't know what he did. I don't know if there was, people have speculated about a change in approach to better take advantage of the dimensions of Yankee Stadium and other parks in the AL East or whatever it might be. But it is truly incredible that Juan Soto, who has been an elite offensive player since he broke into the league as a teenager, has managed to find a new level this year that we had never seen before. I struggle to understand it, because when you looked at Juan Soto previously, you could seriously ask the question, like, how can this guy get any better? Like, where would he improve? And that he now makes like Ohtani and Judge quality of contact is just an insane development to see there.
Right. And it's like, he basically did all that. He kept everything, all the good stuff where it should be. He started swinging harder, hitting the ball harder, pulling like a little bit more. And it's not like he's a Yankee Stadium, whatever, fly ball merchant. Like,
no,
it's so incredible to see, like, all the like kind of negative things that you'd expect by somebody going to Yankee Stadium and just selling out for power. I mean, he hasn't fallen into any bad habits. He hasn't done anything that would suggest any kind of regression. I mean, he's like, I know Aaron Judge is the hitter born in a lab, and, really he's like the last 3 years, kind of the perfect ideal guy at the plate. For some reason, like, I just feel like Juan Soto is like, Aaron Judge is like a beast and one of the best hitters. Juan Soto is, to me, that hitter like born in a lab to hit. Like, he feels like he emerged from the womb and just started swinging a bat and taking walks. And I think
what you're getting at is the Ted Williams comparisons for Juan Soto are apt. Mm-hmm. People don't like that. Some people don't like that. Some people accurately recognize how cool it is. But like, it's true. I was listening. So that same spring training podcast that I was listening back to, you pointed out that Juan Soto feels like one of the only hitters in baseball who controls the at bat. He dictates to the pitcher how it will go. And I think that's extremely, extremely correct. And it comes through in all the stats, whether it's, like I said, that he walks more than he strikes out, whether it's that he's posting career highs in exit velocity and barrel rate and hard hit rate and, all the expected stats. I agree. If you could, and the fact that he's within 6 points of ex woba of Aaron Judge, it's possible that if you were to create a hitter in a lab, you would want him to be, you would create Juan Soto, even though we're currently watching the best offensive player of the last like 80 years.
Yeah, no, I feel like in spring training, I'd kind of, and I believe this a little less more than I did in spring training, where I felt like, Judge is just the best at hitting mistakes. And it's more like the pitcher's fear of him is what drives the at bat. And Juan Soto is just controlling that at bat. I think I've realized more this season that Aaron Judge has a lot of elite plate discipline abilities that is, similar to Soto. Like, I know he's had it, but I've seen seeing him and Soto in the same lineup, I think has made me appreciate Judge more. But there is still something about watching Soto where it's like he stares at the pitcher. He's like moving around in the box. He's like hitting his hand. He's shuffling. He takes these violent swings in the like when he's getting steps out of the box. It's just like it's like a work of art, like a performance where I think Judge is just so calm and collected, and Soto is just so different. And they get to the same place, but man, what a duo to watch, and especially like today where they go back to back. That's almost like the least impressive thing that they could do, just like simply hit home runs back to back. I'm like, that would not feel like a disappointment, but to me, it's like when I see, for me, like the Judge and Soto experience is like them having like really impressive at bats, or one walking and then one like hitting a double to drive the other in, or just like all the different ways they can affect the game. Like hitting home runs almost seems like, okay, like cool, that's awesome. Yeah, like that's what every hitter does. Like Aaron Judge and Juan Soto hit home runs, but they also do like all of the other things too. It's crazy. It's a crazy combination to watch every day. And I know this kind of gets ahead of like life a little bit, but in the event the Yankees re-sign Juan Soto, which we will, I'm sure, talk about at length this winter. I mean, Aaron Judge is going to be 33 next year. Juan Soto is going to be, if he resigns, and hopefully he does, the face of the team for a lot longer, or one of the co-faces for a lot longer than Aaron Judge will be, just based on age. So like this could potentially, fingers are really crossed, be something we're seeing from Judge for a while, but we're seeing for Juan Soto for a long, long time. And I think that's the most exciting thing. I mean, he's got so many years to go.
It is very exciting. Something that I was looking into Glaber's plate discipline stats earlier today, and he is like an 80th percentile plate discipline guy, which is very good. And it encouraged me to look into how Judge and Soto grade out. So obviously you can look at chase rate, you can look at like zone swing rate minus chase rate. But one stat I like is Robert Orr from Baseball Prospectus developed a stat called SEAGR, which stands for Selective Aggression Engagement Rate. And basically it says, what the stat measures is, do you swing at pitches you can drive and take pitches you can't? And it came from an article called Quantifying the Corey Seager Approach, which is all about taking pitches you can't drive and swinging at pitches that you can drive. By percentile, Aaron Judge is 100th percentile in the Seager stat this year, and Juan Soto is 97th. The knock on Soto, which is actually an interesting thing for someone to someday explore, is that he is so patient that he frequently takes pitches that he could drive. And even still, he's, the second best offensive player in the sport this year. So it's a great luxury to have both those guys on the team. And I agree, I remember a basketball game in the like fall or winter of 2013 going into 2014, in which UConn played Indiana at Madison Square Garden. And late in the game, Shabazz Napier just took over, and a number of the UConn accounts, a dime back, no escalators, it could have been, anyone in that orbit, started to tweet things like, we have Shabazz Napier and you don't. And I agree with you that a lot of the end of this season and, how far the Yankees go will be dictated by the fact that they have Aaron Judge and Juan Soto and no other team does. And it's great to have that luxury. Like, it's not, obviously you never know who is going to produce in high leverage or in the playoffs, but the best way to be confident that your guys are going to succeed is if you have the best players in the sport, which the Yankees happen to, which is really nice.
And I mean, Aaron Judge having Juan Soto. I know Aaron Judge is there's a lot of controversy about intentional walks. I mean, think about how much worse it would be if Juan Soto wasn't there. And with the emergence of Austin Wells and the acquisition of Jazz hitting really well, it all helps. But like the single biggest thing I think that will help Aaron Judge see pitches is going to be Juan Soto in that lineup. And that is the biggest like hedge card that you could have. I mean, nothing else is going to be as effective as knowing that, you have to pitch to Juan Soto before you pitch to Aaron Judge. And so like knowing that like either you're going to pitch to Soto or he's going to be on base. And if Soto's on base, then you have to give Judge pitches. It all, I know Soto's not hitting behind Judge, but it all cycles and it helps each other. And I think that you're right. It's going to dictate like in October, the Yankees are going to go as far as that duo will take them. And the fact that they're both there probably helps each of them in different ways. So it's nothing like we've ever seen. And I think we can keep talking about it from so many different angles, but I'm just really like, I'm geared up to see what's going to happen at the end of this year. I just think like, we're talking about Soto resigning. Even if Soto didn't resign, like I couldn't be mad because we've gotten to see this. I'd be like mad at the Yankees for not resigning him, but like I'd be really happy that we got to see one season of Juan Soto on the Yankees. And I don't really think you could ever say that about any other baseball player. Like baseball is too the history of baseball and the seasons mixing into each other. It just a player leaving after 1 year would almost always be looked down upon, but it just wouldn't be for Soto because of what's happening.
Yeah, it's been such a standout year. We once again put out a call for questions from listeners and followers on Twitter, and I think we should answer a few of them. From Waleed Harani at Waleed_Harani. I can't remember if I've asked this before. What do you think the plan for Jason Dominguez / left field is? Does he get the call up September 1st? Does he split reps with Verdugo? And if he goes off, he wins the job? And what happens with Grisham if Dominguez is the left fielder? I think the elephant in the room is Dominguez has not played much in AAA and hasn't been good. So maybe he comes up when rosters expand, but with every passing day, I become less convinced that Jason Dominguez is thought of by the Yankees as a difference maker for this year's team or someone who will realistically be getting playoff plate appearances. And it's possible that with a scorching September and showing the things the Yankees want him to show, he can change that narrative. But I also question how much of an opportunity he will get to play in a September that is fully consumed by a pennant race. So yeah. I'm not expecting to see a ton of serious playing time for Jason Dominguez this year. And I think that given that it seems like he needs some time to adjust and get back into the swing of playing baseball, which he's hardly played for, almost a year, that might be fine. Where do you stand?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the same. I think thinking about what would have to happen for Dominguez to get regular playing time would be, benching Verdugo or getting rid of Grisham, or I mean, definitely I think a call up is possible, but for real regular playing time, you'd have to cut into somebody's time. I'm not saying what I would do or what I would think, but given the circumstances of his injury and the way that the Yankees definitely don't want, I think would be hesitant to just start cutting into people's playing time without, in their mind, a reason, because I think Alex Verdugo's bat is kind of a reason, but it seems unlikely. And I kind of agree. Like, I think Dominguez needs the time. I don't know if his fall of 2023 is the best indicator for like him. I think some people think he's just going to come back and do fall of 2023 again, which was 1 week in that season alone. And everything that's happened this year with the injuries, I'm ambivalent in that, like, I would be happy with anything that happened, but I agree. I'm not expecting Dominguez Soto Judge outfield in game 1 of the ALDS.
From losses above replacement at LAR_baseball, should MLB players be allowed to compete in the Olympics in 2028? So the backdrop here is baseball is very likely to be added to the Summer Olympics in 2028 for Los Angeles. And there's been a bit of discourse thanks to how popular the NBA players on the U.S. national basketball team are about MLB players playing in an Olympic baseball competition. Whether they're allowed to, I mean, I think what losses above replacement is getting at here is, should teams allow players to compete in that competition, not should the competition allow them. I just don't see it making sense. If I were a team in the thick of a pennant race and my star player wanted to go play in the Olympics, like, no, I wouldn't do it. I'm thinking about the prospect of, say the Yankees do re-sign Juan Soto and it's the summer of 2028 and they're, clinging to a playoff spot and have an opportunity to solidify their position. And Juan Soto's like, hey guys, actually, I got to take like 3 weeks off to go play in the Olympics. Like, no, I'm not fine with that.
I don't know what the details would look like, but I saw something where they would build it into the schedule, like get rid of the All-Star game and have some kind of like break. So would you be okay with it if there were no games that they were missing, if it was just like an injury risk situation?
Yeah, I guess, because then it's not really any different than like the World Baseball Classic. And I think it's fine when guys play in the World Baseball Classic. Arguably, the injury risk might be even less, because instead of going from not playing all off season to playing competitive games, you're in the swing of playing competitive games. So if there were a break, I'd be more open to it. But even then, like, imagine it's right around the trade deadline and your best player gets hurt in a game that he's not playing for your team. I think that would really suck. And I think what's good is, like, the World Baseball Classic is, among baseball fans, intensely popular. Mm-hmm. And it's not as if these guys don't have an opportunity to represent their countries in an international competition. And I'm open to the idea that the Olympics are in some way different in nature, but the World Baseball Classic's in the winter. Like, play in domes, have a Winter Olympics baseball.
Yeah.
Like, I have a lot of trouble getting down with it should be in season.
Right. I mean, right. Like my inclination's kind of the same way, where at first I was like, oh, this kind of would be cool. But then it's like, okay, I think even if the injury risk might be less, like the perception would be so much worse. And I think the WBC already kind of struggles with the perception, especially with stuff like the Edwin Diaz injury. Fair or not, like that was a big moment of like, oh shoot, like this is really going to have an impact. Thankfully, I think it was really popular this last year in 2023. So people the takeaway was not the injuries. It was, wow, this is a really cool tournament. And so I would agree that like we should look for ways to build on that tournament. And I think all the best players should be playing. Like, I would almost say, like, make it, even more encouraged. Like, I'd love to see more guys go. I'd love to see the season pushed back or even shortened by a few games. Like, I would not care about that if it meant the WBC getting a greater spotlight. But I think for something like the Olympics, it almost would inevitably lead to some negative repercussion. And when it's fundamentally like the same thing as the WBC, I 100% agree with, like, just focus on building out that tournament.
And lastly, from post Parm Volpe at Volpe Parm 11, what to do with Anthony Volpe / what's wrong? I think the bottom line when it comes to Anthony Volpe is when he can hit the ball hard in the air, he's a good player. And when he can't, offensively, when he can hit the ball hard in the air, he's a good player. And when he can't, he's not. I think, once again, just as happened at the beginning of the season, people saw Anthony Volpe's terrific run of the 2 weeks after the All-Star break, where he had a BABIP over 400 and went, Anthony Volpe figured it out. And that time it was like a little more fine because he hit 5 home runs in that time, but it was still like, guys, he's, I think he also walked only like once or twice in that entire span. Yeah, once. Anthony Volpe exhibited a better approach when we think about the projectability of his offense in 2023 than he has this year. The last thing I want to see from a prospect from year 1 to year 2 is a cratering of power and walk rate. And that is what we have seen. Now, the answer here might just be that Anthony Volpe's ceiling is about a league average hitter, and he's going to continue to play elite defense and make himself a very valuable player in that way. But like, what's wrong with Anthony Volpe, I think, at this stage in his career boils down to like, he's just not a very good hitter. He doesn't make pitchers work hard to throw him strikes. And he doesn't, take walks as much as he should. And what game power he has, which is not unimpressive, is not being utilized to the fullest extent with his current offensive approach or, his current offensive game plan at the plate. So I think it's a matter of, what are your expectations for him? Because I don't hate 95 WRC plus Anthony Volpe, given how good Anthony Volpe is at a lot of parts of baseball. But like, this can't be a guy who has walked only 30 times in 530 plate appearances. And after last year, like, it really shouldn't be a guy who's only hit 11 home runs. So yeah, I just come down on what's wrong with Anthony Volpe is like, this is a shortcoming of Anthony Volpe, the player, not like a short-term problem that there's a quick fix or something.
Right. In fact, we keep having this conversation means there's some issue that keeps repeating. And I agree where it's like, he's probably one of the streakier players we've seen just in terms of like how he gets red hot and then ice cold. And it is because of the things you're saying. So it is something to watch and follow like what he's doing, because I think there's the signs that are good, but he seems like he goes away from those promising indicators like really quickly. And no player's development path is linear. I think we've seen that in so many ways, but
sure,
definitely frustrating because you see what the potential is and then it just disappears like on a dime.
Speaking of streaky players, before we wrap up, just want to shout out Giancarlo Stanton, who had a double and a home run in yesterday's game, and then a home run today as well. So he had a 38 WRC plus in his, how many games was it prior to yesterday? In his 27 plate appearances since coming off the IL before yesterday's game, he had a 38 WRC plus, and then followed that up with 4 plate appearances at 458 and another 4 at 361. So if this is the start of a Stanton hot streak, that could also be extra fun because he has a 123 WRC plus on the season, but he'll have like a 180 or 200 WRC plus over the hot streak.
Yeah.
And
Stanton
reaping the benefits of that. Yeah. Wells, Stanton, and Jazz. Absolutely.
Right. I was just saying, having them batting behind Judge and Soto is going to be a hell of a thing if they're hitting like they're hitting.
Yeah.
It makes the lineup that much better.
It's a formula for success. All right, Whipple, that is going to be what brings us to the end here. We talked a lot on this episode about our expectations for the rest of the season, but let's distill that down into a 1 to 10 confidence in this team.
I mean, this week, after 3-3 week, like as good of a homestand as you could get with, not as good as you could get, but like in a kind of up and down homestand, I think like having a 5-4 record for some of the low points of the week is as good as you could get. At the end of the day, that's a winning homestand. In a tight division race, the Yankees are tied for first and they're tied for the best record in the league again. And, while they, again, could separate themselves more, they're there. Like they're at the top and they're doing all the things that you mentioned at the top of the episode that make their offense stand out. I think I'm really starting to get a little more optimistic about the starting rotation, and I believe the bullpen will figure it out. I'm not as concerned as I think other people are. So I'm going to go up to a 9. I just think like the team is starting to gel in the right ways. I'm always going to be more, I think, concerned about the offensive pieces around Judge and Soto. And I think we've seen a lot of really positive signs Seeing Oswaldo Cabrera actually do. I mean, we didn't talk about him, but he's starting to do well
left-handed
again.
Oswaldo Cabrera is perfectly fine, if not good.
Right. Like we've seen signs of life from a lot of different people. I'm feeling good. I think this is going to be a good week for the Yankees to pick up some more wins, and I think a 9 is like a good mark for how I'm feeling.
Yeah, I'm at a 9 as well. They have the best run differential in baseball. They have the most wins in baseball. They have the highest winning percentage in baseball. They have the best offense in baseball. I share people's concerns about the pitching, although I don't share people's concerns about the bullpen. Like, those guys are good, and bullpen guys collapse sometimes and they have bad outings and it's very visible, but I think the bullpen's good. So I don't think it makes sense for me to be anywhere else. Oh, we got a question about Nick Birdie's velocity and it being down like 2 miles an hour from the beginning of the year. Nick Birdie's just always hurt, and you can't read into anything more than that. Like, the guy's electric sometimes when he's healthy, but he's never healthy. So I guarantee it's just that something is always broken on Nick Birdie. Anyway, I am at a 9. Whipple, before we really wrap this up, any parting shots from you?
Yeah, I'm going to continue my show and tell series. So every
Hell
time I
yeah.
go to Yankee Stadium, I have to get or when it's a new month, I always get the latest version of Yankees Magazine. So got a cool cover this month of Judge and Soto.
Nice.
But that's not
Topical.
the show and tell, because the Yankees had another all-star who in the monthly poster got his own spread. And in Williamsburg, I hang up all the Yankees Magazine posters. So we're going to be adding all-star Clay Holmes to the
yeah.
And I thought you'd appreciate the memory of Clay Holmes as an all-star, the third all-star in a decorated group. And now I will be looking at that every time we record for the next year. So Clay Holmes was an all-star, and, I think people should remember that even when he doesn't always do well.
I do appreciate that. And I would like to point out that Clay Holmes has the 12th lowest Sierra of any. Sorry, he came into today with that. Let me give you the live stats. Clay Holmes has the 15th lowest Sierra of any Major League Baseball reliever, qualified reliever. He's a damn good pitcher, deserving all-star. Love that poster. That brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening. You can keep up with everything we do at YankeesFiles.com. You can follow us on Twitter, where we are at YankeesFiles. You can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, with the added bonus of video on Spotify. And you can get the whole video episode on YouTube, youtube.com/@crosstownsports. You can also find the Battle of New York, featuring our friends in the Crosstown Sports family there. If you like the podcast, we hope you will rate, review, subscribe, download, do all the stuff that you do when you like a podcast. If you don't like it, we hope you'll only boost our listening numbers and not say anything mean about us. Whipple, that brings us to the end. We will be back, similar time, similar place next week to recap the week that was, as the road trip both begins and ends in Chicago and Detroit. And until then, let's go Yankees.